Time Again, exposing the truth. Welcome to Coffee Time Again, exposing the truth. Dale at the microphone, the show that demonstrates how history repeats itself. He digs into the past, shows what happens, and how it is happening now. Follow the path of history to where it goes, then relate it to today to reveal the connections. The culture that forgets its history has no future. A history buff and loves to talk about it, going back as far as ancient Greeks and Egyptians and beyond. So grab your coffee, your chair, and listen to the show. Hope you enjoy.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever the time zone you're in. Welcome to the show. This is Coffee Time Again. And my name is Dale. I am the host. And today we have Gene Moran with us. He's an expert in the industrial government, how do they pronounce that? Government industrial complex. That goes clear back to Eisenhower's time. But anyway, I want to welcome Gene back. This is his second interview. I do that occasionally. Interview him again, see what's changed and how things have progressed, if they have, which is unusual in this world. So anyway, I am Dale, and today we're exposing the truth of the U.S. military complex. Welcome to the show, Gene.
Hey, Dale, thanks for having me back. Gene Moran is the name. That last name seems to trip us up. Not a problem though. But yeah, I'm happy to chat about what's going on or not going on. There's much to discuss, and in some cases there's movement, and others there's no movement.
So I've been following the news a little bit about what's going on in the Middle East and other places where there's conflict. And how are we involved in that mess in Israel and Syria and Yemeni and all that nonsense? Because we're sinking ships and we're sinking, shooting down drones.
Well, I don't think we're sinking ships yet. We are sinking some small boats, but yeah, we seem to be moving sideways or backwards into a little more conflict as we are continually tested around the world. As your audience knows, the Israel and Gaza conflict is playing out across a number of fronts beyond Israel and Gaza, and that's because there are third-party groups, non-state actors who are operating. In most cases, it appears at the instigation of Iran, who supports Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. And so we see different ways in which they are exercising their control of a small piece of the battle space. And it's playing out with attacks in Iraq, attacks in Syria, attacks in the Red Sea. And as is often the case, U.S. forces are deployed around the world, and we are in the mix. Yet we have not declared what the true lines are here. I hate to use the term red lines, but what are the contours of this conflict in our effort as a U.S. government to keep things from escalating into another regional conflict or even war? We are being somewhat timid in how we respond to these situations, in my opinion.
Okay, timid. I like the way you phrase that. I think we're being just downright cowardly in some of it myself, in my opinion. I'm not a big fan of his war effort, President Biden's effort to supply it. And then, of course, we also have what's going on in, oh, darn it. I just...
Probably Ukraine.
Yeah, Ukraine is right.
Yeah, so you use the term war. These are not necessarily our war efforts yet, because we have not clearly declared what is our position. With respect to Russia, Ukraine, we've gone in with half measures. It's now coming up on 2 years where we have essentially supported movement toward a stalemate, where neither side can score the clear win. We have done so by providing aid in the form of financial aid, economic aid, military aid, to the tune of about $100 billion to Ukraine. Yet that has not been enough to cause a clear win. It has allowed Ukraine to participate far longer than most thought could happen. But we're now at a decision point where Congress is holding back, saying, hey, we want to understand what the real end game is here. And so far, a clear end game has not been articulated by the president. With respect to Israel and Gaza, Israel is our number one ally in the Middle East, yet we can't seem to give them a cup of coffee for the support that they're requesting. They've asked for $14 billion in support. The Congress has not provided that. They want to understand, again, what is the end state? What are we trying to achieve here? And there's a difference of opinion on what that end state should be. With respect to the third-party actors, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, that is, causing an asymmetric effort across the Middle East. We're seeing it most recently, today in the Red Sea, as we record this. And we need to decide how much are we going to tolerate as the United States. And I've said this before on the program, what is our position in this world order? Are we going to be this singular defender of democracy and freedom around the world?
Well, I don't know if we should be the singular. I think we need to play a role. However, I was going to say that with what's going on in, I keep wanting to say Nicaragua, but it's not Nicaragua, it's Ukraine and the Middle East, is that going to expand into Russia getting involved with helping Hezbollah?
I think it's an open question. I'm not sure what their connectivity is there or what their capacity is.
Seems to me, though, they're pretty well tied up in Ukraine militarily, that they're just not doing anything. Neither is fighting a stalemate war.
And militarily, seriously, strategically weakened.
Yeah,
they've lost tens, if not hundreds of thousands of soldiers. They've lost equipment beyond measure. They have been substantially weakened in this effort. So I'm not sure what their capacity is, but their longstanding tradition has been to fight these wars of attrition, to continue to throw people at the problem.
Yeah, and that doesn't. Well, the United States has been throwing money at the problem, and that doesn't seem to work either. We're $34 trillion in debt as of yesterday. I don't know what it is today.
Yeah, that ticker climbs fast for sure.
Yes, it sure does. And there are some members in Congress who are saying no money for anybody until we close the border. How's that affecting things?
Well, I can sense that it's frustrating for many Americans to see this form of debate, but it is a way to get to consensus and to force compromise, to have these difficult and sometimes unsolvable problems pitted against one another, to force a compromise. Something will come of it. There is leverage to be had by using the border as the lever. But that doesn't sit well with everybody. And, we're in a time where, many things don't sit well with a lot of people. So I don't particularly care for that leverage point. But, it's a real problem on the southern border, and it has been over multiple administrations. This has gone on for decades in various ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
And so there's a decision point to be made. This is how politics works. It's not pretty to look at, but it will get to a compromise.
We'll find out some way. I did an interview with a Border Patrol agent. He had some numbers that just absolutely floored me on what he was talking about. I've got two. The fact is, I've interviewed him twice too. He was very good at what he was talking about. What is the impact of political and foreign affairs on the news?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Dale.
What is the impact of political and foreign affairs news of the day? Is the question you got here.
Yeah, well, that's sort of an open-ended question to talk about topical issues.
Yeah,
and so if some people say, what is the impact of what's going on in the Red Sea to me? at my home, so let's say I live in Arizona or New Mexico or Florida, you know, the Red Sea is a super highway of sorts for commercial traffic, and a lot of people don't fully appreciate how much commercial goods and services, or not services, but commercial goods travel around the globe by ship. It's the most cost-effective way to move material. That Red Sea is constrained on the southern end by the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, which is about a 15-mile wide piece of waterway. And then on the northern end of the Red Sea is the Suez Canal, about a 120-mile stretch where $9 billion worth of goods pass through that canal every day in normal circumstances. About 20,000 ships going north and south. Today, with the activity in the Red Sea and this heightened state of concern about Houthis firing drones and missiles, over 15 commercial shipping companies have chosen to not use the Suez Canal, which means they're taking the long way around the Cape of Good Hope of southern Africa, which translates into cost. It costs $10 to $50, sometimes $100,000 per day to operate a commercial ship at sea. And if you extend a container ship's voyage timeline by 10 days even, that's a lot of money that has to be borne by someone. Who will pay that? It's the consumer who will pay that.
Yes.
So think of anything that comes in containers, oil, liquid natural gas, automobiles, all sorts of things travel by ship. And if you've closed off that superhighway or made it unsafe, the commercial shipping companies go around. So that's why it's important for Americans, any citizen in any country, to understand what is the impact to them at home.
It's going to be hit you in the pocketbook, and we've already got pretty bad inflation. We've got all kinds of problems going on financially in our country, and to add that to the rate, that's going to really impact the economy extremely bad, in my opinion. I was hearing yesterday that the price of gas is already going up.
There's no doubt we will feel it. The distribution of oil around the country has changed with the introduction of shale in the last decades, but other consumer goods will certainly feel the price. Think about when ships were stacked up at the port of Long Beach not that long ago. It only takes a few days of backup before the shelves at Walmart start to feel it. That's because our supply chains are so tight.
Yeah, I can hear you on that. I wasn't aware that. I knew that the backup and the shortages of everything from baby food to oil was backed up out there in Santa Barbara, and the backup and the supply chain issues that we were having back then. Then they were blaming it all on COVID. I'm not so sure if that's true or not, but that's what the blame was placed.
Well, I think Europe will feel it first in their trade with the Far East and Australia, for example. But the U.S. will certainly feel it here in a matter of days.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It just doesn't take long. They think, well, a ship takes a month to get from England to the United States, so we got a month. Well, guess what? The one that left today, 30 days ago, is now docking.
Yeah. Well, I do think, as we record this in early January, I believe we are within days of taking a more effective strike posture against the Houthis in the uncontrolled portions of Yemen. I would expect to see either a Tomahawk launch from ships at sea or a coordinated airstrike from the air wing aboard the Eisenhower, USS Eisenhower, which is deployed in the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea right now.
Yeah, I knew they had two aircraft carriers. I didn't know which two. I knew.
Yeah, Gerald R. Ford, the newest carrier in the fleet, which came in, 3 or 4 years late at a cost of about $14 billion. That ship is in the Eastern Red Sea right now.
Yeah, I just didn't know well which two was on there. We got a national election coming up here pretty soon. How's that going to affect our stance now?
Well, I don't think that you'll see strikes used to influence political messaging in the U.S. It's been done before, or it's at least been questioned before. The perception was that in the Clinton era, that when he was in a position of weakness, he would allow strikes to occur in the Middle East. I'm not sure that we're in the same situation here, but I think there is some unrest in the national security circles of our nation, where people are wondering why are we being so cautious about this. We're treating Iran as though they're 10 feet tall. Back in the 80s, we thought Russia was 10 feet tall. It turned out they weren't. I believe Iran is taking advantage of the fact that we are being so public with our concern about this escalating too quickly. But I think the 2024 election can be a referendum on what our position in the world should be. What do people think? There are a great many people who think we should not be involved in all of these world events. To those folks, I would say, look back to World War II and how long it took us to get engaged, and look at how the world order changed as a result. And since World War II, I've said this before, we've had nearly 100 years of peace, relative peace in the U.S., where our way of life has not been so directly challenged. If we don't lead on the world stage, there will be a vacuum that will be filled by somebody with less concern about democratic values than the U.S.
Yeah, and my guess would be China.
Could be.
Because they're so much more, they're a lot stronger than Russia is right now. And their economy.
I would expect we'll see more of these third-party, non-state actors having the ability to establish territory and action patterns that are not consistent with our values. I don't know that China has the capability today to support global efforts like that. We'll see. We'll see. I can promise it won't be pretty.
No, it won't be. What we're dealing with, we're also treating China with kid gloves too, as well as Iran.
Yeah, I say that we have very conflicted policy about China.
Yeah.
The military is ready to take them on head on. The diplomatic world would like to admire the problem for much longer. Economically, we're quite confused about what we're trying to accomplish with our policy. We want Buy America, but it's an impractical political tagline. It would be wonderful if America could make everything that we need. We can't, and that's been decades in the making. We need economic activity with China. It is a extremely large economy on the global scale. It can't be ignored. So I say, we're conflicted in how we want to deal with China. We had the President Xi into San Francisco recently.
Yeah,
and he signed an AI agreement. I have zero faith that will be executed with the intent that it was described in the press releases.
Well, I have a big problem with the press releases on anything. Excuse me. However, that big meeting between the presidents Biden and whatever his name is, I never can pronounce his name.
President
President Xi. I think it was more of a showboat type thing, even though there was the AI agreement that came out. I agree with you. I don't think either side is going to adhere to what the principles stated were, to be honest with you.
Well, I think we're still figuring out what AI will be.
Yeah.
When the internet came to us, we didn't fully appreciate what it could be, and I think AI will be something an order of magnitude. Will have an impact of an order of magnitude higher.
Well, I'm already seeing an impact of AI in podcasting. I'm sure you are too. I haven't gotten into it yet because I don't know that much about it. I'm a little tepid about it, a little afraid of it, till I can get used to it and understand it more. So I haven't used it, but there are apps out there using AI for
Well,
podcasting.
sure. And there was there was a time when calculators were not allowed in schools or on to be used on tests.
Yeah.
Gary Vaynerchuk has a line that AI is the tractor of the industrial era when tractors came about.
Yeah.
They scared farmers to death, but look where it's brought us.
Yeah.
I think we need to embrace it and tame it. There are most technologies that have come around. I would say nuclear is a one exception. We've been able to tame or contain technology in a way that is useful to us. Nuclear is one that almost got away from us.
Yes.
But I think AI is something that it can be understood and learned and incorporated into our lives.
Well, I remember when my first website back in the 90s, when I was using HTML1 and doing it in Notebook, and it had me tepid, a little bit scared in the beginning. Now I go in there and matter of days, I've got a website built, but because of the advancement in technology.
Oh, for sure, and to the degree that it can save us on some of the routine tasks,
yeah,
or help improve efficiency, if it's 10% or 90% improvement of efficiency, that means a lot to the economic bottom line.
Mm-hmm. One of your questions you got in here, I understand it, but I think I want my listeners to get a good picture of it. Why does the U.S. care about what happens? And it says in parentheses, name the country. It doesn't matter which country. Why should we care?
Yeah, well, that's sort of a follow up to why does the Red Sea matter? Why does the Suez Canal matter? You could ask, why does Ukraine matter? Well, we saw as soon as Russia invaded Ukraine, there was an impact on the global grain market. There's a lot more grain coming out of Ukraine than people understood. There are a lot of energy pipelines that are undersea and move across country boundaries that many just are simply not aware of until there's a disruption in service. Those things can typically be brought home when people have information. Sadly, Dale, we live in a time when the average American does not read a book in a given year. Does not read one book, and so we also have people who don't travel, have not been outside of the U.S. They don't see what else is out there, other than through whatever lens they have chosen to observe the world through. And by that, I mean, we self-select our news, we self-select how we inform ourselves. And unfortunately, that leaves a lot of people with incomplete information and a poor understanding upon which to make some big decisions about what's important.
I did a podcast on it, and one of the things I came up with that I noticed when I did my research, that 6 corporations own all of the papers, the major news outlets in the world, or in the United States, not the world, but in the United States. 6 corporations control our news, and they're all the same.
That consolidation has taken place over decades. If you look at the Rupert Murdoch's corporation, there was a time when people thought there's no way the Wall Street Journal could ever be sold, until he put a number in front of a disgruntled family, and they bought.
Yeah. Money seems to talk real loud. Everybody. The old saying is, everybody has a price.
Well, and that was a case where it was a family-owned operation that when the family had strife and weakness in it, that Rupert was able to expose. Yeah, and he put a price tag on it.
Yeah. So that's my problem with the news media, news outlets, is just that so few people actually have control of it.
Well, you can go back to colonial times when people were able to print short missives and say nearly whatever they wanted and distribute it as news. I think Ben Franklin made some money doing that, and
Yeah,
it has certainly evolved over time, hasn't it?
it most certainly has. So I don't pay a lot of attention to the mainstream media. I don't even pay, and I don't trust the internet to be truthful either, to be honest with you. So I have to go through several different networks to get something that's resembling a compromise in the truth and what's going on. And I don't believe our government's telling us the truth on a vast majority of things. A good example is that balloon that went over last year, that they tried to hide that from us, the government, that Chinese balloon that covered the United States, that spy balloon.
Yeah, when I worked in the Joint Staff in the Pentagon, which oversees global operations, and I observed at the time that the news cycle was usually about a week or so behind what was actually happening.
Okay.
And sometimes things are couched in classification as a way to just protect information or protect sources of information. But sometimes overclassification of what should be unclassified news inhibits a free flow of understanding between the government and its citizens.
Okay, I understand that very well. So we have to find a way that we can be more free on our press. We got First Amendment says we got freedom of press. However, the press is not being free with us, with no information, I don't think. I think they have more than they're letting know.
You think the press has more than?
I think they have more knowledge than what they're letting us know because of the way they couch their podcast. They're not their podcast, but their broadcast.
Well, certainly there's editing taking place, and there's a process by which sources are developed between the government and news, and then there's a process by which that story gets edited to take on a particular flavor.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you this earlier on and forgot about it. You're talking about the veterans and what's going on with the veterans. Have you heard of a VA program called Aid and Attendance?
Yes.
Yes. I'd like to talk a little bit about that because I'm a recipient of it, Aid and Attendance. So that's how I found out about it.
Okay.
But I'd like to get a little more information out because I got a lot of veterans in my listenership, and they don't know about this one particular, a lot of programs they don't know about, but this one in particular is very beneficial. And in fact, the bottom line just went up because of the cost of living went from $29 a month to $2,300 a month. So can you talk a little bit about Aid and Attendance?
Yes. Now, without being a VA expert on the specifics of their programs, that is a program where certain categories of veterans are eligible for services, sometimes later in life, but some qualify earlier than what would be categorized as elder care. But it's a way for a veteran to get financial support to provide for some of those medically induced conditions that inhibit various activities of daily life. So whatever the cause might have been on active duty, there's a way for the VA to acknowledge through a screening process that certain categories of people are eligible for this sort of support. Those who are eligible are actually a pretty big part of the veterans universe. And so, as you suggest, many people don't realize that they're eligible for this, even if they only had a short number of years of service, because it might have been based on the type of service that they performed or the location where they performed that service. Veterans of Korea, for example, or Vietnam veterans may fit into a particular category, but that benefit translates into a monthly stipend or allowance that is specifically intended to help defray some of those medical costs that have to be otherwise would be borne by families.
Yes, like I said, I'm a recipient of aid and attendance. It took the paperwork involved, the time involved. It took 4 months, 4.5 months to get all the paperwork and get everything approved and go through the process. So it took some time. However, I am very grateful to it. It's been very useful to me.
And there's actually a cottage industry of people out there who help veterans navigate that process.
Mm-hmm.
To me, there are some who shouldn't be in that sort of work, who are not in it with the purest of intent. But to me, it strikes me as similar to tax preparation services, where preparing one's taxes at a certain point becomes so complicated that you just pay somebody else to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes navigating the VA can feel like you're up against the IRS, where it is burdensome, and there's a lot of paper and a lot of questions and a lot of documentation, and they can wear you down, and it can feel like they're just waiting you out.
Yeah.
That's obviously not the case, and I think any government employee of the Veterans Administration would feel, on a personal level, I know they feel proud to be involved in that kind of work and supporting people who have served the country. But it's not an easy benefit to grab hold of, as you suggest.
Yeah, I used one of those third party to get my benefits. It cost me quite a bit of money to pay the third party to help me with the paperwork. That's all they did, was help me with the paperwork.
Yeah.
But it shortened the process by about 4 months, because they were saying 6 months, 8 months to a year if you did it yourself.
Because you would typically make a mistake that a professional won't make. Some of the veteran services organizations, the VSOs, have special access to the actual VA system, so that they can sit at their computer terminal and make nearly a direct entry into the VA system on your behalf. So I know that's not available everywhere in the country.
No.
But for those that do have access to that, it's a good way to speed that process along.
Yes, well, I'm glad you were willing to talk about that, to get this. I want to get this message out, because there's so many homeless vets are in trouble, mentally ill vets, PTSD vets, war combat survivors and victims. And so I really glad you was willing to talk about that, Gene.
Sure.
One of your other questions down here is, why are we so concerned about classified documents?
So the one of the court cases with President Trump deals with his allegedly taking classified documents from the White House to what became his private residence, without having the proper audit trail of how did that documentation move, and then where does it where is it stored. In the military, when people are introduced to classified material, there's a training process, and you are educated on how to or you're trained on how to handle it correctly, how to store it correctly. And if you don't follow the rules, you're subject to punishment. Sometimes that's administrative punishment, but in egregious cases, it can also be jail time. And this does happen. And I have had sailors who worked for me who were involved in the mishandling of classified material to the degree that it warranted a form of punishment. I think President Trump is challenging what are the bounds of his executive authority to make that decision himself. And I think that's a fundamental question that the court case will deal with. Now, I have my opinion on it based on my history of decades of working in and around highly classified material, but I think his opinion of what his what the bounds of his office were in this case, I think he's in a minority opinion. It may be that we get new law as a result of this court case. I'm not sure. But it matters in that others are watching. And so if we want to have a system within the military and within government where we know how government secrets are controlled, then everybody has to participate and live by those rules. If there are exceptions made to how those rules are enforced, then you don't have rules. And so that's why it matters. This is not a trivial issue. It's being presented as such on some news outlets that hey, we're making a big deal out of however many pieces of paper it is. It's not just the pieces of paper. It's the sources behind some of the paper. It's the intent. In some cases, it was options of wartime considerations presented by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. I used to prepare some of those documents, or I should say I had a hand in preparing some of those kinds of documents. And if you collect enough of those over time, you can see, okay, well, these are the courses of actions that are likely to come from whatever sort of event. You don't want that out in the open. It's not healthy. It's not safe. It doesn't add to the security of our country. Having some control of that is an appropriate way to assure the greater security of the nation. It's not about the individual who made a mistake here or who is claiming some special right or privilege. It's about looking out for the nation.
Yes, I agree with you. Military service, I didn't deal with classified documents. I was a cook, but I can see why that's it. And I understand about classified documents. My brother, well, like I told you earlier, was in the Navy for 20 years, over 20 years. And he dealt with a lot of classified documents because he dealt with nuclear weapons on the various aircraft carriers he was assigned to. So he understood it better than I did.
No, there are various categories of classification.
Yes, there is.
And what we're talking about with what was found at Mar-a-Lago was among the most classified levels that are in existence in our government.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they were appropriately classified at that level. I'm not sure. I don't know. But what has been reported as having been found does fit a very high level of classification.
Yeah. And one of your questions, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but one of your questions on here is, what are the broad themes of the national elections and what do they mean?
Yeah, I think they're almost irrelevant in this particular case because I think this election is boiling down to, are you with President Trump or are you with President Biden? Yep. And I think you'd have to scratch your head really hard to find somebody who doesn't have an opinion about either of those two. If it's those two who advance, through the primary and onto the ballot, any other issue doesn't matter.
No,
because President Trump rose without having a Republican platform.
No.
At the convention, they decided we don't need a platform. We're going to follow President Trump. President Biden, is facing a different set of challenges. I think he's well understood as a longtime foreign policy hand. But I think it's a fair question as to whether or not he's able to perform the job in the way that he thinks he's able to. My personal opinion is that for reasons that I cannot fully explain today, I don't think either one of them will be our next president. I think things are going to happen that will force a set of circumstances upon us such that neither of those two will be the president. You can mark the date, and we can come back to this, a year from now and see what happened.
See what happened. Yeah.
I think excuse me, there's uncertainty about President Trump's legal situation. I think in President Biden's case, this is not about ageism. I think it's about his ability to perform in the role. I think he is less capable than he was a few years ago, just physically capable. Right. And that's not a knock on him. age affects people in different ways.
Just
I just looked up today. I was watching Andrea Mitchell on the news, and I did not realize she's 77 years old, and
holy moly,
she's performing at a midday television show. And so there are people who age very, very well and can work into their 90s without a problem. I have a professional colleague in my circles who's over 90 years old, and he's an appellate judge, and if you saw him and didn't know his age, you would think he's 62, and he's incredibly sharp. But not everybody is in that in that condition.
My stepmother's 90 years old, and she's healthier than I am. She lives alone, and up until her birthday last June, she drove. She gave it up because her car died. She didn't want to buy a new one.
We play the cards we're dealt, Dale.
That's the way it is with Mom and me. Because I'll be 74 in about 2 weeks. So you're right about this. The way people age is totally different. You're a long-time Navy guy, so I know why we need the Navy, but I want my listeners to know, why do we need the Navy, and how does it underpin our way of life?
Well, we use the example of the Red Sea and the Suez Canal to talk about shipping and shipping lanes, and sea lines of communication is what they're more formally known as. We rely on international transfer of goods through these ocean superhighways, and without them, we just don't have we wouldn't have the economy that we have, whether it's goods and not services, but goods moving along just our coast from north to south on the east or west coast, or with international trade. Without the international trade, our economic underpinning is not able to produce the GDP that we do. And so how do you protect that? Well, you protect it by demonstrating that you're able to defend it if necessary. And so we're seeing a form of that in this coalition that's been formed in the Red Sea to try to combat what is effectively Houthi piracy. Although the Barbary pirates were in North Africa, a couple of hundred years ago, the playbook is basically the same, but the technology has changed. And so just as the Barbary pirates had to be dealt with, so too did the Houthis. It wasn't that long ago we were dealing with the pirates coming out of the Somalia and the Horn of Africa. These things crop up, but if you can't move goods around the world by ship, you have a problem, and the only way to protect those lanes is to have a Navy capable of defending those lanes.
You brought something up about the Somali pirates and stuff. Is that going to be a problem now that we're using that Horn of Africa more, since we've got the Red Sea tied up? Is the Somalis, are they going to come back and try to do that again? Or they?
Well, you raised an excellent point in that, we might defeat the Houthis in Yemen, but they represent an ideology. And so just like Israel was able to kill a senior Hamas commander recently, again, we're recording in early January. It wasn't long ago. I'll go back to the start of the Iraq War. In the Department of Defense, there was a poster that was made up, which was a picture of, I'll say, 50 of the top leaders of Al-Qaeda. And these were the targets. We're going to knock these 50 people off, one at a time. Well, what happens when you knock them off at the top of that pyramid? Somebody else steps into it. You don't defeat an ideology with a military. So there's a multi-pronged approach required to get control of this. Could piracy off Somalia reemerge? I think it's possible. I think at the moment it appears somewhat unlikely. But there are other nations with interests in those areas: China, Russia, Japan, many of our allies, they all have their own interests in some of these parts of the world that go back to colonization of those areas. But is there a threat of something else coming forward? There always is. A vacuum will fill with a bad actor.
Yes, the nature abhors a vacuum. So when you kill off Al Qaeda, the head of Al Qaeda, whoever it is, somebody's going to take his place, like you said. And the same thing's going to happen in Hamas. Like you said, we just killed one of the senior leaders. I'll bet you within a week they'll have another one in place.
Yeah, he's there today. We just don't know his name.
Okay, I'm not in the least bit surprised that this happens. I understand that. I understand that you can't deal with an ideology with a bullet. It just doesn't work real well.
Yeah. Well, it's good to catch up with you, Dale.
Yes, it is. And we're about out of time here. We're a little bit early. How's this LGBTQ situation working out within the military? I can't get all the numbers right on that, but the LGBTQ plus or whatever the numbers are, letters are, the gay community. Is that causing some problems within our military, or is it because I don't hear that much about it?
I think if you look backwards in time about how we've dealt with some of these social issues, introduction of minorities, pathways to citizenship that pass through the military, for those that are willing to serve for a number of years, it can be a faster track to citizenship. If you think back to the 90s of don't ask, don't tell, it almost seems quaint now as kind of a silly way to have approached a condition of life that people can either agree with or disagree with. The reality is that we have a recruiting problem. We need qualified people to perform all sorts of military roles. We've demonstrated that in many cases that concern about one's sexual orientation doesn't matter. When it gets into having to change military standards, I think that can be a legitimate cause of concern. But I mean military warfighting standards, not somebody's perception of how you should necessarily look or dress. I think it's an issue outside the military much more than it's an issue inside the military.
Okay. All right. Anyway, I'm going to stop the recording. I think we pretty much covered everything on your list. Is there anything you need to say?
Dale, it's great to catch up with you.
It is.
I wish you and your audience well in the new year, and happy 2024.
2023 for me was rough. I hope this one's a better one. But anyway, you have a marvelous time and stay good. And I may be back in touch with you again one of these days just to catch up and see what's going on, Gene. So anyway, I'm going to shut the recording up, but we got a second.
Thank you for listening to the show. There are show notes and a place to comment at https://coffee-time-again.libsyn.com/website. He hopes that you liked what you heard and will tell others about him. Dale is attempting to get a following that both disagrees and agrees with him. He does not want yes men. If you disagree, wonderful. He is happy to have you here as a part of the Coffee Time Again team. Dale does not talk about the news of the day. He is attempting to give a history lesson that is just as important about what is going on in the headlines of today. Please do not hesitate to contact him. Just remember that Dale wants a clean show, meaning no cussing, name calling, yelling, or hate allowed. You can disagree with him and not be disagreeable about it. Support him and help keep this alive. https://glow.fm/coffee-time-again.